What if I told you that Buddhism is three things at once? A religion, a philosophy, and a way of life. And yet it's none of them. How is that possible? Hey, wisdom seekers. Your friend here from Buddha's Wisdom. In New York, Sarah closes her meditation app after her morning mindfulness session. I'm not religious, she says. Buddhism just helps me stay sane. 2 blocks away, Professor Chen writes on his whiteboard. Buddhism? The ultimate philosophy of mind. His students furiously take notes as he dissects Buddhist logic with scientific precision. Meanwhile, in Los Angeles, the Nguyen family lights incense at their local temple, praying for their ancestors. Their faith in Buddhism has carried their family through generations. The Nguyen family had been fortunate to have their family rooted in Buddhism. 3 people, 3 completely different versions of Buddhism. Interesting. The fascinating part? They're all practicing exactly what the Buddha taught. But here's where it gets interesting. 2,000 years ago, the Buddha was asked a question. His response left everyone speechless. He simply smiled and held up a flower. That silence sparked a debate that still rages today. Is Buddhism a set of practical life tools, a profound philosophy, or one of history's most powerful religions? The answer? It unlocks a mystery that's baffled scholars for centuries, and might completely change how you view your own path to truth. Today, we'll uncover why the Buddha deliberately created a teaching that works on 3 different levels. We'll explore how these 3 faces of Buddhism aren't contradictions, they're pieces of a brilliant puzzle that's more relevant today than ever. But first, let's go back 2,500 years to a crucial moment that changed history. The religious roots. Dawn breaks over ancient India. Thousands of devotees gather, bearing flowers and incense. Unlike any other religious gathering of its time, something different is happening here. The Buddha has just been asked if he's a god. His response? Today, millions light incense before golden Buddha statues. They chant sacred sutras passed down through centuries. To them, Buddhism isn't just a teaching, it's a profound connection to something greater than themselves. But why did the Buddha, who rejected being called a god, establish religious practices? The story begins with a surprising discovery. After reaching enlightenment, the Buddha faced a dilemma. He'd found a truth so subtle, so profound, that he doubted anyone would understand it. For 7 days, he sat beneath the Bodhi tree, contemplating whether to teach at all. Conducting some sort of evaluation in the West, he decided he would try to learn from Lydia. Then, he saw something that changed everything. A lotus flower, blooming in muddy water. Some petals were still underwater, some were breaking the surface, and others had risen above, pristine and open to the sun. In that moment he realized people were like these lotuses, at different stages of spiritual growth. Some needed the comfort of ritual and devotion. Others could grasp deeper teachings immediately. This is why Buddhist temples arose, not as places to worship the Buddha as a god, but as spaces where people at every stage could begin their journey. Each ritual, every sacred chant, was designed with a deeper purpose. Take the simple act of offering incense. On the surface, it looks purely devotional. But hidden within this practice lies a profound teaching about impermanence. Watching the smoke rise and fade, just as all things in life arise and pass away. Even today, the millions find their first step toward understanding through these religious practices. Mai, a 3rd-generation Buddhist in Vietnam, shares, When I bow before the Buddha statue, I'm not worshipping a god. I'm recognizing the potential for awakening within myself. But here's where the story takes an unexpected turn. The Buddha who established these religious practices also said something revolutionary about them. The philosophical revolution. Imagine this. A young philosopher approaches the Buddha with absolute certainty about his beliefs. Hours later, he leaves, transformed. Not by new beliefs, but by learning to question everything he thought he knew. Today, in universities worldwide, professors realize something startling. Buddhist texts outlined critical thinking methods 2,500 years before Western philosophy discovered them. But here's the twist. The Buddha wasn't trying to create a philosophy. He was doing something far more radical. Is there a self? Does time really exist? Is anything permanent? While other teachers gave definitive answers, the Buddha responded with a method that still baffles modern thinkers. He turned each question back to human experience itself. Take his most famous dialogue. When asked about the nature of reality, the Buddha picked up a handful of leaves and asked, "How many leaves are there in this forest?" "Countless," his student replied. In the same way, the Buddha explained, "I teach only what is essential for freedom. Everything else, those are just leaves in the forest." Nichal. When we engage with the collective, the world will be changed. This wasn't philosophy for philosophy's sake. Each question, each analysis had one purpose: to free the mind from suffering. The Buddha challenged his students to question not just their beliefs, but the very way they thought about thinking. And perhaps he was right. Consider his revolutionary approach to the biggest philosophical questions. Instead of debating if gods exist, he asked, "Why do we seek them?" Rather than theorizing about eternal life, he investigated. Why do we fear death? Then he did a turn-by-turn to the world. All I need is myself to know, a knife or a gun. Instead of defining ultimate reality, he showed how to find peace in this moment. I know the way. I am the shepherd. I feel the way. I am my life. This philosophical revolution isn't just ancient history. Sarah, a quantum physicist, shares, "When I first read Buddhist logic, I was stunned. They were asking the same questions we're asking in modern physics about the nature of reality, consciousness, and observation. But they were asking them over 2 millennia ago." But just when students thought they had grasped Buddhism's philosophical core, the Buddha would say something that turned everything upside down. The living practice. 6:00 a.m. Tokyo. A business executive starts her day with 3 mindful breaths. Ideally 3. 12:00 p.m. London. A teacher pauses before responding to a difficult student. 8 p.m. New York. A surgeon mentally rehearses tomorrow's operation using Buddhist visualization techniques. 9 p.m. None of them consider themselves religious. Few have read philosophical texts. Yet they're all practicing what the Buddha called the true heart of the teaching. Meet David, a former Wall Street trader who discovered Buddhism during the 2008 financial crisis. "I wasn't looking for religion or philosophy," he says. "I was looking for a way to stop my mind from eating itself alive." Yes, what he found surprised him. The Buddha's most revolutionary teaching wasn't hidden in temples or ancient texts. It was something radically simple. Every moment is an opportunity to practice. Washing dishes, that's meditation in motion. Dealing with a difficult colleague, that's compassion training. Hazel, stuck in traffic, welcome to your mindfulness laboratory. Laboratory? Modern science confirms what practitioners have known for centuries. These simple practices literally rewire your brain. But here's what's fascinating. The Buddha knew this would be proven someday. He repeatedly said, "Don't take my word for it, test it for yourself." Lisa, a single mum of 3, laughs. I don't have time for hour-long meditations. But I practice presence while making breakfast, patience while handling tantrums, and self-compassion during exhaustion. My whole life became the path. This is Buddhism stripped of all cultural trappings, no rituals required, no philosophies to accept, just a simple question. Mr. Lion, what's happening right now, and how am I relating to it? Yes, but here's where it gets really interesting. These practical tools aren't separate from Buddhism's religious and philosophical aspects. They're part of something bigger. A complete system for understanding and transforming the human experience. Evan, a cancer patient finds peace through mindfulness. A grieving father discovers healing in meditation. An anxious student learns to befriend their thoughts. These aren't just techniques. They're gateways to the same insights the Buddha discovered under the Bodhi tree. The same wisdom that built temples and sparked philosophical revolutions is available in the simplest breath. Breaths can teach and care, and prayers can weigh down the challenges of the day. The great synthesis. Remember our 3 practitioners from the beginning? London, Bridget 11. The family at their temple. Here's what they discovered. They weren't on different paths. They were climbing the same mountain, from different sides. Picture a diamond with 3 faces. Each face reflects light differently, yet it's the same diamond. Buddhism's genius lies not in its religious practices, philosophical insights, or practical tools alone, but in how they illuminate each other. Meet Michael, a skeptical psychologist who started with simple stress reduction techniques. The better I got at mindfulness, he shares, the more I wanted to understand how it worked. That led me to Buddhist philosophy, and something unexpected happened. I found myself drawn to the beauty of traditional practices I once dismissed. In Japan, ancient temples now offer meditation apps. In America, philosophical discussions end with ceremonial tea. In India, tech companies start meetings with mindfulness practices passed down from the Buddha. But here's the revolutionary part. This integration isn't new. It's exactly what the Buddha designed. When you bow in a temple, you're practicing mindfulness. When you analyze your thoughts, you're engaging in devotion to truth. When you practice everyday mindfulness, you're touching the sacred in the ordinary. You are supposed to see the sacredesque go all the way to the ending. Sarah, our New York meditator, now attends philosophical discussions. The little party resumed their walk. Professor Chen discovered profound peace in simple daily practices. The Nguyen family finds their rituals deepened by understanding their philosophical meanings. Like 3 streams flowing down a mountain, each path, religious, philosophical, and practical, eventually leads to the same ocean of understanding. But here's the beauty of Buddhism. You don't have to choose one stream. You can drink from all 3. Excerpt. This isn't about believing everything or practicing everything. It's about finding your entry point and letting it naturally lead you deeper. A businessman discovers spirituality. Through stress reduction, a religious practitioner finds deeper meaning through philosophy. A philosopher learns the power of simple daily practice. Visit your friend Aunt Walena. then I'll consider Buddhism isn't just a religion, philosophy, or way of life. It's a complete map of human transformation, with different vehicles for the different terrains of your journey. The resolution. So, what exactly is Buddhism? Perhaps we've been asking the wrong question all along. The better question is, what do you need right now? Are you seeking peace in a chaotic world? The practical tools are waiting. Melissa's memory represses the doubts. Wrestling with life's deepest questions, the philosophical path opens before you. Yearning for connection to something greater, the sacred traditions stand ready. The Buddha understood something profound about human nature. We don't all find truth in the same way. Some need to experience it. Others need to understand it. Some need to connect with it through their hearts. Remember that flower the Buddha held up in silence? Now we understand why he smiled. The flower wasn't just a flower. It was every possible way of experiencing truth. Through practice, through understanding, through devotion. And think of Buddhism like water. It takes the shape of whatever container holds it. For those seeking practical solutions, it becomes a clear spring of daily wisdom. For philosophical minds, it flows like a deep river of understanding. For spiritual seekers, it reflects the vast ocean of sacred experience. James, a former skeptic, shares, "I started with stress reduction apps, now I study ancient text and sometimes meditate in temples. Each step felt natural, like following a trail of breadcrumbs to something deeper." Maria, once strictly religious, adds, "Understanding the philosophy behind our traditions made them more meaningful. My practice isn't just ritual anymore. It's alive. Here's what makes Buddhism unique. It never forces you to choose. Start wherever you are. Trust your natural curiosity. Let your practice evolve. Because ultimately, Buddhism isn't about becoming Buddhist. It's about becoming awake to your life, your potential, your deepest truth. Whether you are struggling with daily stress, searching for deeper meaning, or seeking ultimate truth, the path begins exactly where you are, right now, in this moment. That's what the Buddha discovered under the Bodhi tree. Every path to truth is valid when walked with an open heart and a clear mind. Your path begins. Before we end, let me share a secret the Buddha told his closest students. Truth is like the moon reflected in water, he said. Some will see it clearly, others will point to the reflection itself, and some will argue about which pond shows it best. He smiled and added, "But the moon remains the moon." Your path to understanding might start with a meditation app on your phone. It might begin in a philosophy book that catches your eye. Or perhaps it's in a quiet moment that fills you with wonder. But the important thing is to recognize it and have it in your life. Start there, that's perfect. Because here's what we've learned today. There's no wrong door to walk through. Want to start with simple mindfulness? Perfect. Drawn to deep philosophical questions? Follow that pull. Feel called to traditional practices? Trust that instinct. The Buddha's final words weren't about religion, philosophy, or even practice. He simply said, "Be a light unto yourself." And he wrote in translation, "Aitisma," in the invitation. So, take what serves you from our exploration today. Una day. Indeed, the practical tools to navigate your daily life. The philosophical insights to understand your experience. The sacred practices to connect with something deeper. Your path might combine all three or focus on just one. Either way, you're not just studying Buddhism. You're discovering your own capacity for awakening. The invitation is simple. Start where you are. It starts where you are. Trust your journey. And remember, every great awakening begins with a single moment of paying attention, just like you're doing right now. If this exploration sparks something in you, join our community of seekers. Hit subscribe, share your insights in the comments, and let us know which aspect of Buddhism speaks to you most deeply. Until then, stay curious, stay wise, and remember, the path to truth begins wherever you are.